So good morning. Thank you all for coming to our session on mapping success, building effective product roadmaps. My name is Zachary Grimshaw. I'm stepping in for my colleague Greer today. She was unable to attend the conference at the last minute. And I've kind of spent the past 6 years in various different capacities working on Drupal projects, from product strategy all the way down to content administration. And as a dog lover myself, when Kerry created this presentation, she had all these different dog analogies and visuals, and I decided to just keep them in here. And I think it's a great way to kind of convey a lot of the concepts that we're going to be going through and making them more memorable. So really, it's a puppy-guided journey to better Drupal planning. So today's plan, we're going to go over some foundations of road mapping. Then we'll dive into kind of building roadmaps, managing some timelines, talk a bit about resource management, and then also quickly explore some of the tools and techniques that might help you. And so the goal is by the end of today to leave you with some practical strategies that you can implement immediately. A little bit more just about me before we dive in. As I said, my name is Zachary Grimshaw. I'm a senior product manager and strategist at Form 1. And Form 1 is a digital consultancy. We've been working in the Drupal space for 15 plus years. And as you'll see, I am very obsessed with dogs. A little bit more about Form 1. So we work exclusively with mission-driven organizations to amplify their impact. Some recent government clients include EPA.gov and their Drupal rebuild, the state of Colorado, Baltimore County, Fairfax County, state of Virginia, DOT, do a lot of different government work. And just like puppies need training plans, Drupal projects also need training plans. So by the end of today, I really want to leave you with 3 key things. So first is learning how to create the Drupal product-centric roadmaps. Second is applying the prioritization techniques, which often we find people kind of overlook or forget about or struggle with, as well as some strategies for effectively managing over the long term. There we go. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. And we'll also touch on resource management as well, which is another area where it's often neglected. And then finish with showing some real-world examples of different roadmaps we've created with clients over time. So what is a product roadmap? Why do you need one? Why is it important? I think first, it really sets a foundation, first and foremost. And at its core, it's a strategic document that's going to communicate your vision, your direction, your priorities, and then also your progress over time. Think of it as your journey map for your puppy's development, from an energetic novice who you just brought home to a pet that you've lived with for a couple years. And for us, when we think about product roadmaps, there's kind of 4 essential components. First is establishing your vision and goal. Second is outlining your key milestones, kind of what your major releases are, when your delivery dates are, and then also defining the features and requirements. So think of them as the specific tricks that your Drupal site will learn and prioritize value to its users. And then also accounting for those resources and dependencies. I think most people get the first 3 right, the vision goals, the milestones, the features functionality, but often struggle with the resources and dependencies piece. So we'll go into that in a little bit. I wanted to show this here, kind of the product lifecycle versus project lifecycle, as I think it's worth calling out due to kind of maybe how some different organizations think about things. Really love this graphic, and all credit to our friends at Ad Hoc for this graphic. But there's a common misconception when you start a Drupal project that you might see a clear beginning, middle, and end. But really, unless you're going to be shutting down the site right after you launch, products don't work that way. They're very cyclical. So you're constantly gaining new insights, new stakeholder requirements, external environments are changing, etc. And so there's no real true beginning, middle, and end in the same sense as a project or initiative. And so when thinking about the product lifecycle, you want to be able to measure your impact, creating your outcomes, and kind of rinsing and repeating in this cycle here. And sometimes this can be a big mind shift for organizations who only currently plan in projects or initiatives, so it's worth bringing attention to it.
Can you use the mic? It'll help with the bar.
Yes. So for new projects, the sooner you get started with a roadmap, the better. You can often start pulling in different priorities or elements together through discovery and design and iterating based on your impacts, inputs you've collected from your users, from your stakeholders, and also your actual product team. We recommend that you have it completed by the very latest with stakeholder buy-in before the build phase, just so then you have clear direction and North Star for prioritization as you move into build. That being said, it's never too late to start a roadmap. There are many times where I've come into a project or engagement, dropped in mid-development, and built out a roadmap for them so we can continue on and not kind of have a stop-start nature. And you may just have to work a little backwards or reconfirm different priorities with a couple different stakeholders. So just wanted to show a quick example of what a product roadmap can look like. This is one that from a client that we've sanitized for privacy, but some key things that stick out here are wanting to make sure that it has a strategic vision behind it, has user-centered priorities, as well as a technical feasibility mapping, and also that resource allocation planning. So the dog analogy here is you don't want to be teaching them too many tricks all at once. You want to kind of have it phased out in a logical manner. Additionally, don't be intimidated. This can be one level of a roadmap, but it can also be much more simple. And you also don't need crazy complex tools or dedicated tools for it. You can even get started in something like a spreadsheet or a document. And if you're currently managing a Drupal project or product and you don't have one yet, like I said, never too late to start. At the end of the day, your roadmap really just needs to break things out in different capabilities or a logical sequence that kind of builds towards your vision over time. So a bit more into why you might need one. So I think often people might think that you have your tickets, you have Jira, you have your requirements, you have your acceptance criteria. Why bother with a roadmap? And really, at the end of the day, it is a communication tool. It's something that's meant to help align stakeholders, especially outside of your product team, on a common plan. And this is very critical for Drupal projects where you might have many choices you have to make at the start or middle of your project. So it really communicates your priorities and progress over time, balances your short-term execution with long-term vision, and helps when you need to adapt to changes while still maintaining that overall direction. But a good roadmap, just like a good puppy training plan, balances ambition with realistic expectations. It's flexible enough to accommodate the surprises, but structured enough to keep everyone moving in the same direction. And this, at its core, is what makes a roadmap important and useful. All right, so the Drupal difference for product roadmaps. So what makes Drupal roadmaps different than regular ones? So think of it like a puppy playpen where you need the right boundaries, the right toys, and the right room to grow. So for us, with Drupal's modular architecture and its frameworks, that means that your roadmap needs flexibility. Unlike some monolithic CMSs, Drupal functionality can be phased, which can be a benefit, but it does require a bit more upfront planning for foundational pieces. This might include your architecture, your content types, your modules, and your theme. More specifically, though, you need to account for several unique factors. So first off is the community lifecycle. Drupal is a community-based product, as you know. So you have Experience Builder, you have Layout Builder, you have paragraphs, you have new Drupal releases that are coming. And all these different releases and updates, you really need to account for them as they will affect your roadmap. And you need to build this into your timeline or risk building on an abandoned approach. We don't want to pick something, build around it, and then all of a sudden the community has decided they don't want to invest the time or effort or money into it, and you have to pivot significantly on your own dime or in your own planning process. Additionally, please account for Drupal core updates in your roadmap. Core updates are going to need a lot of time and regression testing, and you can't just release them and hope that everything works. Additionally, want to think about custom versus contributed solutions and balancing those. I'm sure we've all experienced a situation where there is a specific stakeholder who has a vision for something that nothing in the community can solve or has already out there, and you have to build something in order to meet that vision for them. But you also need to consider, what is it going to take to maintain that over time, and update it, and how is that then going to impact the other pieces of your roadmap and the other pieces that you have planned for building in the future. And just like how every dog is different, every Drupal project is as well. So you want to tailor your roadmap approach in ways that respect the platform's strengths and its limitations. Talking a bit about the Drupal technical architecture piece of this, some key elements. First off, starting with your base. This is the starter kit or Drupal 10 contributed modules. And it's not just as simple as downloading and installing. Most agencies and services will have their own starter kits. And you want to make sure that you ask a lot of questions to really understand what you're getting here. What are they using? Why are they using it? What release is it built on? What modules does it ship with? And so on. Next is your theme. So themes really matter. At Form1, we use Gesso, which is our homegrown solution, but you want to make sure that it meets the needs of your users and your staff capabilities. And maybe you choose a community theme because it's something that your team knows, and that is totally okay. Additionally, for your backend theme, use Gin. It's terrific. I'm not sure why everyone isn't using it yet. It's the default in Drupal CMS now, so would very much highly recommend using Gin or moving to Gin if you're able to. And as I said, your backend and your frontend and backend theme are going to affect both your user experience and your authoring experience. And really don't forget about the authoring experience. So you want to make sure that you discuss these early on in your roadmap planning process. Next up is page building. This can be a little contentious, but want to figure out whether you're going to be using paragraphs or layout builder or experience builder or Acquia Site Studio. Many of these decisions have long-term consequences, so you want to make sure that you prioritize not just your user needs, but also kind of what solutions are going to affect your long-term architecture and sustainability as well. And then again, really want to harp on also the content authoring and content manager experience as well, and not just your end user experience. And lastly is your hosting environment. So if you're a tech person, you've likely experienced an insane amount of bot traffic and AI bot traffic over the past couple months, and your hosting partner is going to make or break these type of situations. So you want to make sure that you're working with them and having those zero-day necessary items in place. Each hosting provider is going to have their own specific approaches and products that they offer for this, and some of these can affect your architecture decisions. So again, really want to plan for that early and often, and make really good informed decisions around what's being offered. All right, so here we kind of have the roadmap level pyramid. So a complete roadmap operates at 3 different levels. The first one is a strategic level, and these are going to be focused on your business goals and user needs. And this is often for those senior level business stakeholders, and more often than not communicated through a slide deck or Gantt chart or something like that. Next up is your tactical level, which is focused on planning for modules, features, integrations. And this is communicated often through a road mapping tool, a spreadsheet, or again, kind of whatever you have. And then lastly is the implementation piece. These are your daily tickets, your backlog, managed with something such as like Jira. And really want to make sure that when we're thinking about who these different levels are for, I know that I've had situations where we we deliver a tactical spreadsheet to someone's boss or boss's boss, and they say they understand it, but at the end of the day, they don't, and then they get kind of upset or frustrated or annoyed when they don't understand why something wasn't included in a release or why it wasn't prioritized for release. And But the key here is to make sure that you're communicating differently for the different types of audiences and picking what will work best for your stakeholders and your teams. So with that, it is okay to have different versions for different people. And just like getting a new puppy requires preparing your home, starting a Drupal project requires proper groundwork as well. So you're going to start your roadmap. Might be asking, where do you start? What do you do? Is it a document? Is it post-it notes? Is it scribbles everywhere? It can really be anything. You can start anywhere. I think in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that's just a Google Doc with some bullet points on it. And that is way better than nothing. And just kind of getting ideas out on paper. And when really it's about getting all those ideas out and organizing them, which can sometimes require facilitation, which is where tools like FigJam or Mural can come into play, those virtual whiteboarding tools. Although I will say they're great for that collaboration piece, but for certain stakeholders, it might not be the best tool to deliver your final roadmap in, unless they work in those tools daily. Delivering them a Figma link or a Mural link might have a little bit of challenge navigating around and finding what they're looking for. And in reality, everyone really likes slides and documents. It's a necessary evil at times, but they do work. And then also at Form 1, we've been really loving Jira Product Discovery, which is relatively new, which you can see up there. And it's really good for brainstorming and organizing, and then, of course, has integration into actual Jira. Worth checking out and worth asking your Jira admin or Atlassian admin about. Depending on your plan, might require an additional license, though, just a heads up. And just like you don't want your dog chasing every squirrel it sees, you don't want to be chasing every idea that comes up in road mapping planning. So let's talk about Puppy Training 101, or for us, prioritization. Everyone can create a roadmap, but often struggle with the prioritization as well as the resource aspect of it. And so some key questions often get is like, how do you prioritize? How do I allocate resources based on that prioritization accordingly? And so we'll dive into that a little bit and some methods to use. So you might have heard of some different methods already for prioritization. The Moscow framework, the impact effort matrix, the Kano model, rice scoring, etc. And so if you're just getting started with road mapping, I would highly recommend using the Moscow method as well as the impact effort. And I'll go into some examples for both of those in a moment. But remember the puppy principle of prioritization. Basic training comes before advanced tricks. You need to make sure that you have that foundation before moving on. So for Drupal, that means, like I mentioned before, that architecture decisions, your core functionality and content structures are going to be that foundation. And again, might be thinking user needs come first, and you want to be building for user needs, but again, you need to make sure you have that foundation in place in order to enable building and serving those needs in the long run. Here is an example of using the Moscow method for a book review website launch. And so this is, I guess, for those that aren't aware, Moscow stands for must have, should have, could have, and won't have. And yes, I know the acronym doesn't exactly match that. Don't know why. I didn't make it, so can't speak to that. But it's really good for that strategic level communication, especially when you're kind of putting things into high-level buckets, and you can put this in front of your boss and be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and you can clearly see kind of what the must-haves are all the way down to what will not be included, and they can kind of get a quick sense of what we're prioritizing first and foremost before getting to probably more backlog items that might be in the could-have. And even, I will also say that like it can be high-level, and it probably should be high-level. For the Moscow method, it's not necessarily the best for nitty-gritty feature prioritization. Next up is the value effort or impact effort matrix. This can be more complex than the Moscow method, primarily due to the challenge of how do you quantify value? How do you quantify effort? I'm still figuring that out, so if you have any thoughts, please let me know. It's definitely more of an art than a science. But I think for Drupal projects, we often think of the timescale of projects in components rather than individual pages. So for example, an interactive map feature, it'll have that integration, design, build, QA, etc. But in this case, we want to think about it as it's high effort and it's high value. So that would end up putting in the upper right-hand corner there. And this kind of where you come up with the impact and value, that'll come out of stakeholder conversations, both with your team, with your development team, especially for the effort piece, as well as business stakeholders and your user insights. And so those discussions and insights will ultimately be what ends up informing where you put it in impact effort. A common mistake that we see at the road mapping stage is thinking kind of like home page is 4 points and basic page is 2 points. And especially when you're using these type of frameworks, that can be a little too detailed. You want to bring it a bit of a level up. In that case, maybe just call it pages for now. That said, estimation is extremely important, especially when communicating to your product team and figuring out impact on timeline. And if you don't have someone who is good at estimating, recommend taking that number and adding a bit of a buffer, maybe 30 to 40%, just to be safe. All right, so let's talk timelines and managing resources. When setting timelines for your roadmap, always want to factor in, like I mentioned, the Drupal release cycles, but also the learning curve for your teams for any new features that you're building. Really want to push home the governance piece, not just the tech piece of it. Additionally, integration complexity you want to think about, and as we talked about, estimations are never correct. I think we kind of all know that. And a good rule of thumb, even maybe if you are good at estimating, is to add 20% to your timeline. And you might have some contingency at the end, but it's always best to under-promise and over-deliver than do the opposite. We know that puppies don't grow overnight, and these roadmaps don't happen overnight either, and nor do your Drupal projects. Some things that come to mind when I think about considerations on timeline, content migration. No one really gives enough time for content migration. It's usually a lot more complex than you anticipate, and want to make sure that you're definitely adding buffer time for content migration. Again, the governance piece, training and adoption. Really want to make sure that your teams know, especially those that are going to be putting in or managing content, they're going to know how to use it, they're going to know what to do, and they have all the tools and resources they need to deliver that front-end experience to users. And then also testing and refinement, as well as, like I mentioned, the development complexity factors with Drupal. And the best roadmaps are written in pencil and not permanent marker. So be prepared to adapt. This is really where that contingency planning comes into place. I don't think I have had a single roadmap where my first draft of it I came up with, and we've actually stuck to that 100%. So want to make sure that we're able to adapt and update as needed. Some common pitfalls here. Scope creep, I'm sure we've all run into that at some point. Different stakeholders wanting to sneak in different features. So again, that's something to really spend a lot of time managing. Technical debt, no one wants to talk about it, but need to think about how we're going to consider technical debt as things progress. And then also, again, underestimating kind of configuration complexity, especially within Drupal. And especially with different integrations that might come up. A quick practical tip here, create milestones that combine both the technical achievements and visible user benefit. So effective milestones are going to be specific, measurable, and meaningful to stakeholders. So Drupal projects, maybe this looks like content model completion, theme implementation, core functionality release, full feature deployment. And just like puppies have training milestones, their first sit, their first walk on a leash, their first stay command, we want to make sure that we're celebrating each achievement and not just letting it pass by as, got to take the wins where we can. All right, so resource management and allocation. Definitely haven't cracked the code here, but these are some things that have helped us or worked for us in the past. For team allocation, want to make sure you know what your team or who's available to you can do. What skills do they have? Ask questions to better understand what they can do, as you might learn that they have skills that you didn't know about that even go outside of their job titles. And so really this is about not just tracking who's available, but also who can do what effectively. Second is time budget. I think all the things under time budget are important, but it feels like everyone forgets about content migration as well as buffer time. Those go hand in hand. So please, please, please put in buffer time. And everything here combined helps with resource management, but especially with workload balancing across teams. It's a universal problem. I think the key here is, like I said, that roadmap is a communication tool, and using your roadmap priorities as rationale to get the resources you need to prioritize people's workloads effectively. So this might look at like leveraging the trade-offs of an impact of not getting the resources you need. So if X person who you want to work with or have them work on what you're working on or what you're building, you can't get them for 3 months, then you'll be able to communicate, well, if we can't do that, then we have to deprioritize this feature that is currently in our roadmap, push it until next release, which then would have impacts on whatever business or user goals there might be. And I found that is a very effective manner of especially in showing the long run of how it impacts everything, kind of the domino effect there, which then can also help you with the last point, which is external resources. If you can't get who you need internally, can you get external help or specialists? We're talking Drupal specialists like agencies or contractors, such as Form 1 where I work, as well as hosting, infrastructure, and third-party partners. All right, so making it visual. So different organizations need different ways to visualize roadmaps. Gantt charts work well for detailed timelines, while Kanban approaches are meant to be more suited for agile implementations. Just as different breeds of puppies need different training approaches, same with your road mapping tools. So choosing visualizations that resonate with different stakeholders is going to be key. There are several tools that work well for road mapping, many of which you might already have available in your suite of tools at your organization. Jira, Asana, Trello, Product Board, etc. The key is finding tools that support the high-level strategy and detailed technical planning, and those don't have to be the same tool. They can be very different tools, Jira for the detailed piece, or you could then have Google Slides for that very high-level piece. You don't need something that serves both functionality, although you can find them at times. Some tips for selecting different tools is considering your integration with your development workflows or workflows that are already in place. Balancing, like I said, detail with usability of the actual information as a communication tool, and ensuring different stakeholders have access to it as needed. Some other quick tips here. Like I said, consider your audience. I think we've gone on that a little bit, but both yourself and your other stakeholders. It's good to have a version that fits on one page. This is really helpful both for that kind of strategic level stakeholder, but also you're onboarding someone to a team. Sure, maybe even if they're a developer, having the Jira backlog or a more detailed roadmap is going to be helpful eventually, but having a kind of summary version they can review and get the key concepts will also be very helpful. Next is grouping by theme. So don't just have a list of 100 different features that are scattered and don't have logical groupings. Much better to have a grouping by themes to kind of understand what are the different areas of value that we're providing. Using date ranges. Q2 is going to be a lot safer than maybe committing to April 15th, especially if you're looking at multi-year roadmaps. And like I said, leave some slack, plan for those surprises. And then lastly, while I say review quarterly, you should be updating your roadmap more often than that, but this is specifically reviewing them with the key decision-making stakeholders at least quarterly to make sure that we're all aligned, especially as the roadmap changes and things shift. Want to make sure that you get their eyes on it and get their approval on it. And also just make sure you schedule it, maybe even having a reoccurring meeting, because it won't happen unless you do that.
Can I ask a question? Any tips on the scheduling that internally, reviewing quarterly with the stakeholders, but updating it internally? Any tips on how often that should be?
I think it depends on your specific development life cycle, so it depends. But I typically, for my projects, I have a weekly reminder on my calendar to both roadmap and documentation updating, and maybe I don't get to entirely update the roadmap in that one little meeting that or block that I have. But at least I'm able to jot down or think of, okay, from this week, what are the things that are going to impact our roadmap? How do I what am I going to have to do? So then maybe, every month I then can go in and schedule a bigger session for myself to go in and update that.
And that you're doing that with yourself, though, not with other team members.
So good question. Want to take other people's inputs? I think depending on how much you're changing, if you're blowing something up or big priorities are changing, then yes, having a collaborative session or a meeting to discuss that monthly is going to be helpful or as needed. But as I said, I'm a product manager, so I'm owning the roadmap for a lot of it, and so if I'm getting different insights or changes in priorities from clients or stakeholders, I'm then making a list and then figuring out how that impacts our roadmap and making those changes. And then in those, again, depending on how much of an impact it's going to make, again, blowing up, you want to get that confirmation from the decision makers more sooner, but if it's smaller, things can wait for that quarterly review.
Thank you.
That makes sense. Yeah, I don't know why there's a duplicate side in there. So to end things off, I'll run through a couple different examples of roadmaps, and I started with this one because you might have thought or in the past that this is what a roadmap looks like, and this can be very overwhelming. This is maybe a lot of different works or a lot of different work streams or initiatives that are out in this roadmap, and this is helpful to some degree depending on who it is, but you might be thinking of this is complex, this is overwhelming, but they can be as simple as getting started in a Google Doc like this one. This is using Google's new Google Docs. I'm blanking on the name of it, but the feature where you can add little drop downs and color code things, which is helpful. But you can start here, make it very simple. Here is an example of Jira product discovery broken out into now, next, later, as well as won't do. This is also Jira product discovery, but it's also tracking against development tickets, so you can see the progress of the epic over time. And so, while a senior level stakeholder might not want to go in and see your whole backlog or click on individual tickets, they can come here and kind of see this very quick glance at what the delivery progress is. And again, the next couple ones are the virtual whiteboarding tools, so Figma and Mural. And they really look pretty, and they can be helpful for helping figure out something in a meeting or collaborating something virtually if you're not doing it in person. But again, I personally don't recommend delivering them as your final roadmap or the piece that you're going to be updating constantly, as they're all individual elements, and trying to drag and drop it gets very messy very quickly. But yeah, as I said, if you're just brainstorming around things, the virtual sticky note features and stuff can be very helpful. Here's one we did for a client, and this is the top level view of like now, next, later, now being what we were calling the first release in this case, and it's kind of, you can see bucketed, these are kind of key features and functionality groupings, or could be like epics, but then specifically taking that now one, this is the timeline view for the now phase. And so here you can see that we have some initiatives like UX design, product requirement refinement, and technical architecture, but then also we have kind of sprint-ish things, but different areas where we're going to be focusing on different elements from that now phase from there. Here's one multi-year roadmap broken out into different phases. So, this was done earlier or end of last year, I think so. Now, then 2025, and then 2025, 2026. And then we have this kind of continuous optimization one as well. This one, I really like. Again, this was done in Google Slides. It packs a lot into just one slide, and is pretty easy to take away what is here. So, again, we have initial go live. I forget what year this was. It's Drupal 9 roadmap, but it's for late October, November. And so you have the kind of budget amount there, which again, we work with clients, so it was like the current scope of work. And then you have the key initiatives or feature areas, and the little dots are kind of a combination of value and effort. So again, migration, content migration. It's going to take a lot more time than you think. But when you're presenting this to someone, they can still get and understand the concepts or information we're trying to convey here. Here's another one where these first two phases include kind of some strategic planning phases, and then we have it broken out into release 1, release 2, and then also a continuous improvement and ongoing optimization piece. And lastly here, this one, again, going back to that governance piece, broken out into the lovely typical consulting framework of the people, process, technology, or in this case we have platforms. But we, in our roadmap, didn't want to just think about the tech piece or what the solutions the user can be interacting with. Also wanted to think about, what are the people and capacity that we have to have, and then also what are the processes that we have to have in place to, again, continually deliver on this year over year. And with that is our presentation, so I will pause for questions. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how your, product plan works with your dev team's release schedule, and how those two things kind of marry up? Because sometimes you're working with external stakeholders that are expecting feature releases to be released at a certain point in time because they have commitments to other stakeholders that they're relying on you to get out. So how do you guys kind of work those two things together?
Yeah, I think for us, early and often engaging those stakeholders, where again, the planning doesn't begin with the tech and the user need, it's also involving those stakeholders. And for us, you might have a drop dead date of okay, we're planning for the next X amount of time. We need to know what are the things that you have promised to other stakeholders. So again, it's just asking questions and engaging them. And if we have to then go back and be oh, we can't actually deliver that by that date, then we'll have that conversation. But gathering all that information to then have those as inputs into your first iteration or draft of your roadmap, specifically for that stakeholder piece. I think the first part of your question was around the development cycles for especially tech team. In theory, those should flow from your roadmap. So your sprints or your release schedules should all be flowing from your roadmap, and you should be working with your development team to understand, again, that impact and effort, the effort piece. How long is it going to take? Can we actually deliver these feature groups by then? So I kind of see it as it flows from the strategic level roadmap all the way down to that implementation and development cycle. Mm-hmm.
I'm super obsessed with the pyramid approach to the roadmap. It's an unusual situation to be in, but I feel like our clients, I'm just kicking off projects and trying to develop a roadmap, so this is so timely. Our clients are wanting to start kind of at the implementation level. Do you have any tips for how to sort of get them thinking a little more on the business goals and user needs side? Because I feel like it's so weird to be the partner and trying to push that. Usually they're like, I don't care about the technical details, just make sure I get these outcomes, but it's the opposite.
Yes, I've also experienced that with clients. I think really painting the picture of how, I guess it's often, just starting with the implementation level is like often short-sighted. And I think having even if you are having to kind of discern those, if they don't want to tell you them, I think coming up with something, again, working backwards, which isn't ideal, coming up with something and then putting that in front of them, and they can then tell you, this is wrong, but then at least then they might give you that input you need or that feedback you need into that. And that is, again, it's not as an ideal or effective scenario if they really don't want to talk about those, but really I do like to start off with like a kickoff project with like more of the strategic, like having a workshop around the strategic priorities and goals. And that might involve, I think, also especially, again, working with clients, also it might be for us, the marketing team or the web team is our client, and those are the people we're working with, and we push to engage those who might be outside of that, who are the more business level stakeholders. And sometimes, you keep pushing, but they won't budge. And that's where then coming up with your own, even if they are wrong, they then might be able to, let me shoot this off to so-and-so, or let me, get feedback from so-and-so on this. And then even if they rip it to shreds, you at least get that feedback. So that's one way. It is tough in that client services kind of relationship. And especially as a product manager, that's probably like the biggest thing I run into is helping kind of control or steer that strategic direction as well. And you can do your best to be that kind of trusted advisor and helpful person, but if they really don't want you interacting or don't want to involve other organizations, or other teams or stakeholders, there is only so much you can do in that client relationship, unfortunately. Mm-hmm.
One thing I try to do in that scenario is try to find different ways to explain that if you take away the top level, then the bottom level expands 3 or 4 times. So if you can show examples of that.
Yeah, I think that's going back to like prioritization. If you're trying to do too much too fast, I think that's the other thing is there's also another pyramid that sometimes I have, like the MVP pyramid, where like you have all these different layers, but then an MVP is going to be a very small slice of the entire pyramid, and when you're at the implementation level, you don't really have, and only at the implementation level, you don't necessarily have a firm grasp on what is the value that you're delivering, and can often result in an experience that is just doing too much, too fast, and doesn't succeed at anything. Okay.
And I don't remember if I missed it, but did you have a slide that talked about, or at least maybe you could elaborate on, because it's the same challenge in our jurisdiction, where you have executive level leadership not focusing on the top, right? What's the value or what's the business goal here? And then you've got mid-level business management kind of focus more on features and functionality. And then that leads into, okay, it's all about just implementation, like, when are we going to implement this thing? And no one's thinking strategically. So is there, with your roadmap as your deliverable, is there an expectation of like how often should you be talking to strategic, executive leadership? Is that the quarterly thing you were referring to, or and then different groups, like actually users, should you talk to them at a certain frame with the roadmap in mind? And then obviously you have, milestone sprints that are happening, and that's when you want to communicate to people, hey, do I need to update your training? Do you need updated documentation? That makes more sense to me, but the higher level touch points, I think those are the challenging areas.
Yeah, so I think that quarterly review that I was referring to was with I think I've seen the senior level stakeholders, but they're also like key decision makers as well, not just like they happen to be higher up in the organization. And yeah, that is, you don't want to have those so frequently that they're going to check out and not engage. But you want to have them frequently enough that you're gaining their buy-in and also trust over time. So I think that is, for that, you had another...
I feel like we're having, in my jurisdiction, we're having those strategic leadership level decision maker meetings too often. And I feel like they miss the mark on, what is the business goal? Why do we have a project? What's the purpose? What's the value to our endpoint? We're, government organization, so constituent. How is this leading into constituent value? How do we help people? Yeah. And there's never a discussion about that. It's always about a business unit, user saying, hey, I really want to have this functionality or feature on the website. And then the leadership's just like nodding their heads like, oh, yeah, that sounds good. That's great. But then there's
those
really
buzzwords check out.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot of buzzwords being thrown around. And I feel like there's gaps on the strategic level. And that's, to me, always the challenging part. I'm a manager. And so you've got executive leadership in our county, and I always feel like it's like somebody's got to make a decision. Like, what's the decision making? That is, to me, the most challenging, because the implementation and the tactical level areas, I'm comfortable there. I'm not comfortable when I'm not getting any hey, I'm here to implement your idea, your policy. I can give you recommendations, but you got to make the decision, or you got to give me a direction. And there's always typically a gap at that level.
I'm curious, when you're saying you're having those conversations too often, are those all those different stakeholders in one meeting together talking, or are those individual meetings that you're having?
I'm talking about, we have executive stakeholder contacts on a bi-weekly meeting. So every 2 weeks we meet and we kind of go over the website. I take the technical lead on it, but realistically it's kind of like, hey, is there any gaps or features or functionality? Very few of the things we actually discuss as strategic or business goals or what's the vision of the website for the future. No one's talking about, hey, should we be focusing less on search and more about AI interactions? I mean, just things like that that's what I expect talking about, or at least giving some direction on, what are our goals, like what do we don't like at a high level, and then how do we format a roadmap around it? Because I think the roadmap is a great opportunity to say, here's really where it is at the strategic level, because then maybe I can get more engagement from that group of people.
Yeah, so my advice would be to try to take them off those regular meetings and instead have facilitate a, might be quarterly or what would work for your stakeholders, but quarterly session it's a workshop that's not feature specific. It's on those. Maybe bring in some of the make sure you have someone such as yourself who's representing technical things, so you can weigh in on kind of effort piece a little bit, but bringing in user insights. And then combining also, I have oftentimes when stakeholders will not, or the business level stakeholders will not give me or don't even know themselves their kind of vision, mission goals, I will go to their website, I will pull the vision, mission goals I can find on their about page, I will stick them in a mural board for when we have a workshop, and use that as a starting point to start talking, and having that workshop not focused on feature planning. We're not, maybe idea generation at some point, and then additionally having one key decision maker in that meeting who can be the kind of final say when it comes to things. And everyone's input should be gathered. There would be different voting activities and stuff about priorities. But then at the end of the day, when you're figuring out, okay, what are the next big things to include in this phase of the roadmap? There's one person who's going to make that decision, so you're not getting tons of chatter or input or conflicting stuff from different senior stakeholders.
Thank you.
Good job, Jack.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.